Step 1.
On a 4 extra long hook, I'm going to wrap some lead wire that's about the same diameter as a hook shank in the front section.
Why are you putting it in the front section?
Well, I want to get a jigging or porpoising motion in this fly to simulate the natural ribbon-like motion that leeches swim with.
Step 2.
With the lead in place, I'm now going to attach our tying thread. I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger to hold the lead in place, as the thread tends to push it backwards if you don't. And now I'm going to cover the entire hook shank with tying thread so we have a good base to attach our materials on.
It doesn't look like that much lead there. Does it make that much of a difference?
Well, you can vary it. It depends on the line you're going to use. We just want to get that little bit of pitching motion if we can.
Step 3.
For the tail, I'm going to use some long strung marabou. I'm going to strip and fold about a ½ inch or so worth of marabou.
What do you mean by folding?
Well, if you noticed, I stripped the marabou off the plume, and when it became almost unmanageable, I then folded it back onto itself and began the stripping process again.
So you get quite a clump that way, I guess.
Yeah, and it all stays in control. You're not fumbling around and then dropping fibers or having the whole length affected because it's uneven. See, it's nice and even. And we bound it in right at the base of the lead wire so we have a nice smooth underbody.
Step 4.
I'm taking another plume of marabou, a slightly different shade, and using the same strip and fold motion, remove a section from the side of the feather. The differences don't have to be much, but leeches tend to be naturally modeled. And again, we're going to strip it to length and then trim away the excess. And by tying in my marabou this way and sliding my thumb and forefinger back, I'm always staying in control of the material. If I tie it in at the base and go forward, I end up trying to catch it all the time, and it makes it a little difficult and tough to manage.
Step 5.
For the body, I'm going to use a series of different colors of aftershaft feathers from a ringneck pheasant.
Are you using the aftershaft feather for its flowing quality in the water?
Yeah, it really breathes and moves and comes to life, and leech patterns need to be animated to be successful. So I'm just trimming away the butt and plucking the tip to prepare each individual aftershaft feather.
Step 6.
Although mobile, aftershaft feathers are brittle, and we're going to use a dubbing loop to help control them. I'm going to pull down a long length of thread, simply because we're trying to make the body in one application. Coat the thread with dubbing wax to act as an adhesive to hold the feathers in place.
Step 7.
Take the prepared aftershaft feather so the stem of the feather lines up with the thread. Place them nose to tail, alternating the colors.
Step 8.
Bring the tying thread up around your forefinger and back to the hook shank. Wind the thread backwards, closing up the dubbing loop, right back to the base of the tail. The thread at the front of the fly, insert your dubbing tool into the dubbing loop and gently close the loop. Slowly spin the loop tight to capture the feathers. Continue spinning until those fibers radiate about 90 degrees. Once the loop is tight, we're going to start wrapping it forward in close touching turns, sweeping the fibers out of the way.
When you say close touching turns, what do you mean exactly?
One turn right next door to the other. The next turn goes in front of the previous turn. We want to completely cover the body. We've got the makings of a little aftershaft feather duster here. So we're going to continue to stroke those fibers backwards so we don't trap any of the fibers down. This is what the appeal of the fly is all about. You can see here that we haven't got enough to make the trip, so we're going to have to form a second dubbing loop. And that's okay, because you want to keep your dubbing loops small and manageable. Long dubbing loops are hard to control.
So you can pretty much tie it off anywhere you want to go and then start again.
Exactly.
Step 9.
We're going to form the second dubbing loop in the same manner as the first by pulling down the thread and coating it lightly with dubbing wax to hold the feathers in place.
I guess this is the only way you can actually make a material loop like this to tie onto this particular fly.
Yeah, it's an example of how dubbing loops can be used to reinforce fragile materials, so you can really control them and they don't control you. Again, alternate the colors to match the color scheme of the fly. Close the loop up by winding back to the base of the original body, and then bring the tying thread forward. And then simply insert the dubbing tool into the dubbing loop gently, closing it up, and then begin by spinning lightly so you don't accidentally throw the feathers out of the loop. Once they radiate out about 90 degrees, you know you've got a good purchase on them and you can begin winding the body. Again, use that thumb and forefinger to stroke the fibers back out of the way so you don't accidentally trap the very look we're trying to create by trapping feathers underneath themselves.
You find that bobbin gets in the way quite a bit when you're doing this?
It can do, and there are bobbin racks that can hold them out of the way, but I just have gotten used to sort of using my back of my hand to push it out of the way. You kind of get into a rhythm. And then we're just going to simply tie off the excess dubbing loop. Throw a few extra wraps in front to further secure it, lock it in place, and then trim away the excess.
Step 10.
For the hackle, I'm going to use a pheasant rump fiber that's of similar color to the body that we're trying to tie. We want the individual fibers of that pheasant rump feather to extend no further back than about the midpoint of the tail. We're going to strip away all that fluff so we expose just the individual fibers of the feather. I've taken my thumb and forefinger and creased the feather to soften it so it's easier to tie in. And then simply twist the stem and it will break.
Step 11.
To wind the feather, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees and then attach my hackle pliers to the tip. This ensures the feather is positioned properly.
Is this what they call palmering?
No, this is just actually tying a hackle. Palmering is where you take the hackle and it's wound over the entire body, much like a rib. Woolly bugger is an example of a fly with a palmered hackle. About 2 to 3 wraps is fine. That's usually all the pheasant rump feather will allow. We want it to be sparse. We don't want too much fibers.
Step 12.
With the hackle in place, simply sweep the fibers back to expose the hook eye, and then build up a neat thread head.
Step 13.
Take your whip finish tool and complete the fly by placing the whip finish at the head of the fly.
Step 14.
To identify this as a weighted pattern, simply place a dab of red nail polish on the hook eye. The completed Aftershaft Leech. Mobile and animated. Great for selective trout.